Hi, do you think that by talking about trauma, you might be re-traumatizing yourself, or maybe someone has told you that you're re-traumatizing yourself by talking about your trauma? Well, this video is for you then. I made a few shorts on this topic and realized that people were pretty interested, so I decided to make a long format video on it. This is Kelly talking, and on this channel, I talk about childhood trauma. My trauma ranges from definitely spiritual, emotional, psychological, physical, and sexual, and being sent to the troubled teen industry after all of that, experiencing all of that. So then there was also brainwashing. Oh, yeah, that's what the troubled teen industry did to me. Anyhow, so I did a little bit of research, and I'm just gonna do this, so I might be a little all over the place. But the first thing I'd like to address is my understanding, not just a belief, but it's like a understanding through reason and logic. And so I'll lay that out for you. But you cannot re-traumatize yourself through talking about your trauma. That's just not a thing. And in one of my videos, a person claimed to be a therapist, and they were like, I don't know if they said they were a therapist or a psychologist, but they're like, 100% that is how people re-traumatize themselves. And I try to steer people away from doing that. I don't want them talking about that. And I'll discuss that more, just that comment alone, for sure. One thing I always, tell people is that psychology and therapists, like psychologists, they are not the authority. Like, I believe that some psychologists and therapists are authorities on certain matters. Like, they may know a lot and more and really be informing people, but a lot of it's flawed. Like, we have a history of doing lobotomies on people in psychology. So, historically, they have completely dismissed people with PTSD and other disorders that were results of trauma, because sometimes therapists, they don't want to actually see always the harm. Like, not everyone who becomes a therapist or a psychologist is going to be a good therapist or psychologist for everybody. Maybe some of them are not good for anyone. I also like to remind people of Judy Hildebrandt. She is in jail for child abuse, and she was a therapist. And that happens. So just because someone is a therapist or a psychologist doesn't mean that you should trust them. I also think that there's a high percentage of people who are narcissists and socio or psychopaths who go into the field of psychology, because people like that tend to like power as well, and it can be a very powerful relationship to be someone's psychologist. So let me first get into definitions. I love definitions. We have to agree on what we're even talking about. What is re-traumatization? Firstly, I don't know where this person who commented comes from. But here, I'm from the United States, and in the DSM-5, there's no definition of re-traumatization. So where do we find a definition of re-traumatization? We actually find that from, the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration. They have a definition. And in their definition of re-traumatization, it is reliving stress reactions experienced as a result of a traumatic event when faced with a new, similar incident. So it's another trauma, a new trauma, or new experience of adversity. So re-traumatization is a new trauma on top of an old trauma. Okay, talking is not a trauma. Okay. Now, I watched a great video that I'm going to link in the description. It's by Dr. Scott Giacomucci. Okay. Dr. Scott Giacomucci. And he defined, re-traumatization, like I just, like defined as well. I got it from his video. It was really good. And he also defined what is a trauma. So the trauma is a wound that results from any event or experience that overwhelms our ability to cope. And a trigger is something here and now that reminds us of a past traumatic experience, and it activates the feelings, sensations, thoughts, or even the images, visual pictures related to that past trauma. It could be anything. So, talking about your trauma can trigger you. It can be a trigger, but it's not re-traumatizing yourself. And then there's also just discomfort as well around that. I think a lot of the time when people are accusing you of re-traumatizing yourself, it's because the person who accused you of that is uncomfortable. Actually, they're the one who cannot deal with it. And that's fine. We couldn't deal with our trauma. Other people can't deal with hearing about our trauma. Because it's hard stuff. It's trauma. And, we can't expect other people to listen to our trauma also. You may have a relationship where it seems really important to you for somebody to be able to listen to it. Say one of your parents neglected to notice a trauma. Say they were just complacent in it. Then you may want to be able to talk to them about that because you want to have closure and you want them to see you because they're your parents and it's a very important relationship, or maybe your best friend, or maybe your spouse, or maybe your therapist. But also they and everyone, kind of needs a break from it, right? So I think it's a balance in if you tend to talk about your trauma and if that's something that's on your mind a lot. There are periods, I think, following a trauma where anyone is going to become obsessed with it because, right, essentially, if trauma is when you can't cope, it overwhelms your ability to cope, and also you want a solution, your body, your brain needs to have some kind of resolve of this matter, and so you might replay it. That's part of a symptom of trauma, is to have post-traumatic stress disorder. It's after the stress, and you might have flashbacks, and it's really hard. I deal with flashbacks. I've gotten to a place where I really don't have them as much. It's been at times a daily thing, or there's certain things that would just do it. Sometimes I didn't have any memory of a trauma, but I knew that I had trauma related to it because every time I saw zip ties, they scared me. I didn't have a specific memory of my dad tying me up with zip ties, but I really don't have. I have a few now, but at one point they were all erased. But there was a point where I had no memories of my dad abusing me, but I had some memories of him abusing my siblings. And I knew he also abused me, but with zip ties, it was more just zip ties startled me. And I just know that it was him because also he used a lot of zip ties in general working around the house, and he was a handyman, so he always had those. And then it did come back to me eventually one time. I remember he zip tied me to take me to the troubled teen history. At one point he just of course overreacted to me existing and just tackled me and zip tied me. But I have a general understanding that that wasn't the only time that he ever did that. Sorry, I digress. But yeah, reliving trauma in many different ways is a part of trauma. That's just how it is. Okay, so I really recommend this video by Dr. Scott Giacomucci. Also, I want to talk about a specific study done in the UK. I will also link that in the bottom. They were basically interviewing, like, I don't know, somewhere, I don't remember, and I didn't want to take great notes. At one point I thought, oh, I'm going to take all these notes for this, and then I'm like, no, I'm just going to do it. I have enough memory of it. So in this article, they interviewed like 1,000 therapists in the UK, and they asked them about their thoughts on re-traumatization and whether their clients would get re-traumatized by talking about their trauma. But the definition that they used of re-traumatization in this study, the people who did this study just made up, and their definition is a like increase in symptoms. So like, what is CPTSD? They were talking about people with CPTSD and the symptoms of CPTSD. Well, of trauma is, I think CPTSD is the symptom, and all of its attributes. So like increased flashbacks, increased irritation, anxiety, depression, things like that. They were saying that increase in those symptoms would mean that you're re-traumatized. But the therapists in that study who do trauma-informed therapies, where it does often include discussing your trauma, they said that, you know, that is a part of the healing process. And that's 100% what I believe. That's definitely what I've experienced. It's really rare, almost never are you going to like, yeah, I think never, but absolutes are hard, but you can't overcome a trauma or something without actually experiencing it. So say you dissociated through your trauma, or you, like, there's lots of different types of dissociation, or you just ran, or there's like a lot of different things that you did to cope in that moment. Maybe you just suppressed your emotions really hard. For me at my boarding school, I think one way that I coped was just like thinking about the other girls at the boarding school and feeling bad for them so that I didn't feel bad for myself. And then when I was really young, I felt bad for my mom because my dad was very violent, and I put a lot of care. I mean, I was definitely afraid of my dad, but I would like avoid my own pain by thinking about my mom's pain. And to actually be able to get to a better place, we have to acknowledge the hurt that we went through. We have to understand it. Like, I dealt with depression, and I'm not going to get super into that, but I mean, I've dealt with a lot of stuff, but one of them was depression, and I didn't have any clue most of my life where it came from. I didn't understand, and I would talk to my therapist sometimes when I was doing really well. I'm like, I'm doing so well, but like, anytime I'm alone, anytime it's quiet, I just realize like I'm not happy. I'm depressed. And I just always have depression going on in the background, even at like my absolute peak periods. And so, and I didn't know why. Like, it seemed like no reason. Like it didn't have to do with the present moment. And over time, I ended up realizing that my depression came from abandonment going back to infancy, because my dad was extremely violent. My mother would leave, and she thought that if she was gone, that, you know, us kids would be safer because she thought, well, he won't hit the kids, he just hits me, especially when we were younger. I mean, it got to a point where she knew he was hitting us, but she just, reasoned to herself that we were safer if she left, that the fighting would stop. But I felt scared. I never even, I don't remember any time as a child believing my mom was abandoning me. But I would always wonder when she'd come back. There was no telling. Would she come back the next day? Days later? Weeks later? And like my memory of those periods when she was gone is pretty blank. But I just know that there was no way of knowing how long until she came back. No way of contacting her either. This was before everybody had a cell phone. I don't even think my mom had a pager. If she did have a pager, it's not like I had her number. I remember my dad having a pager, but we never had his pager number. So I realized that my depression was related to that abandonment and like my continual self-abandonment. That's, what I was realizing was just that I was continually sacrificing myself for others, for my kids, for my spouse, for my friends. Like I would want to make sure that they had their needs met, and then I would have a hard time meeting my needs. Like I would be late to work to ensure that everybody else could have what they needed in the morning. And anyhow, through just like digging deeper into this self-abandonment, I realized that that's where my depression came from. And then I experienced like immense, like gaping, like I the only way I can feel to describe it is like I felt like a black hole. Like it didn't feel like loneliness. It felt like a black hole of desperation, of like just intense suffering, like inner suffering. It was intense. And not going to get into how I exactly overcame that in this video, but like it was just so hard. And though I did end up healing mainly through like experiencing that pain and suffering, crying with my husband holding me, and me asking him, like, if I were a baby, would you hold me? Would you pick me up and hold me? And him being like, yeah. And him just holding me as I was bawling my eyes out. So it went really bad. It got really bad. I had like so much experience of pain and suffering, but then my husband helped me to like rebuild a new connection where I felt like I was cared for, like I wasn't just totally abandoned and alone. And that helped me heal my depression. So that was just one story, but I'm going to talk about some other therapists, who actually like are strong advocates for listening to people's trauma. Like when you have a trauma, Dr. Gabor Mate, I think he's absolutely amazing. He may not be right about everything, but maybe he is right about like a lot. And one thing that he said, which has just been really true in my therapy experience, is that the best therapists that really have the most like positive things happen for their clients are really good at listening. They don't lecture so much. They're not like really trying to tell their clients what to do, but their clients just really feel listened to. They feel heard. And Dr Bradshaw, he's also a therapist. He wrote a book called Homecoming, and he also has done like a television program. I don't know. I think it was like on PBS or something, maybe BBC. I don't know. But you can find it on YouTube. Dr Bradshaw's Homecoming. It's like 10 series. I did watch the entire thing, and he does a lot of like inner child work with people, and he talks about how you can do inner child work, and he walks you through like his method of doing that. He also says that, you know, there was a point when he was a therapist and he was really good at getting his clients to just not think about their trauma, to not talk about it. That was like his main way of working with clients, was just to distract them, right? That's what he thought was helping. But then he realized, like, wait, I'm a total alcoholic. My life is so messed up. I'm on the surface like a therapist that's reputable, but actually I'm doing terribly. I'm suffering. I'm in pain. And he realized he wasn't doing his clients a service, like not a good one. He did them a how to avoid it service, but it was a disservice. And he realized that, and he realized, like, you actually have to address your pain. Otherwise, you might just end up like me, an alcoholic. So then he ended up getting to inner child work, where you definitely get in touch with your trauma, have to experience the pain and suffering of that. And it's hard, and it's not something that can be forced, and it's not something that you're always ready for, and you don't always know if you're ready for it. So I think that's really important. I once read a book that just, it made me so mad, like every now and then. And then at one point I just had enough. I couldn't read any more of this book, because the authors of it, especially one of them, was just so arrogant. He was talking a lot about like the royal people, or like all of these people that he worked with, and he also was talking about like meditation, or I think it was meditation, some type of work, that he was saying how people need to use common sense to determine whether they can meditate on certain things, because, you know, it might like if you have a lot of trauma, it might be hard for you to meditate. And that like made me so upset that he would call it common sense, because one of the times, like when I first wanted to get back into like really working on myself and trying to understand what that meant, I was often like told that I should try to meditate on gratitude, because people thought like, oh, I'm so sad about the sad things that I really need gratitude. And you know what? That's just not helpful. Like, actually, I needed to grieve. My body wouldn't let me have gratitude unless I grieved. I mean, it's not like I wasn't a thankful person. I also don't know what they mean, but like my life couldn't be full of enjoyment because I needed to grieve the things that had happened to me, the loss of innocence, the abuse, the suffering that I witnessed and experienced. So, I tried to meditate on gratitude. And when I did that, I got like sucked through this portal. It was like I had visions as if I was like on something, but I was just totally sober trying to meditate. And I had visions. I went through a portal, and it went like backwards in time through different abuses that I experienced, that at that time I had like suppressed my memory of them so bad that I didn't remember all of those things. I was just like, what's wrong with me, right? What's wrong with me? And then trying to meditate on it, I it was like, let me show you what's not wrong with you, but what happened to you, why you've made the decisions you've made, how you've gotten where you are, like goes back in time through your childhood, like from your adulthood to your like adolescence and childhood. And after I had those visions from trying to meditate on gratitude, I was like non-functional. I couldn't find the way around my like block where I lived. I happened to work just a few blocks away from where I lived at that time, and I got lost, like trying to go to work and trying to get back home, just walking. I was so disoriented, and I did end up needing help at that time to get out of that period. That was, what is it called? A panic attack that like lasted for a week. Yeah, and I did need help getting out of that. I needed medicine to help me. I took some meds, and after about a week, because I was like, I need to be able to function. Like I need to be able to drive. Anyhow, just like having a break from that experience of panic helped me to like recalibrate. But so there's unwanted reliving. I have this in quotes, so I'm going to read it. I don't know if this was from the video from Dr. Scott Giacomucci. I think it was. Unwanted reliving of the past trauma that's done forcefully or without consent. Being forced to talk about past trauma before you're ready to talk about it. Like that could be traumatizing. You know, if somebody's trying to force you to do it, or you can have like a panic attack like I did. Nobody was forcing me to, but like I didn't have the tools to deal with it. It was a shock to my system. It was an intense shock to my system of repressed memories. So like if you have unwanted reliving or being forced to do it, like that's bad therapy. I've had therapists where I paid these people and they were just like, I have an agenda. I want you to talk about this. I want you to improve in this area. Like, yeah, eventually I stopped seeing those therapists. And the first time a therapist ever did that to me, where they were like, I have an agenda for you and what I can envision your life being, like they decided they didn't want me to drink. I don't have a drinking problem. Like I drink as an adult socially a couple of times a month. And it was probably months I go without drinking at all, but she was like wanting complete sobriety. And she was like, that's what I'm going to get from you. And I'm like, that's not what I want. And she also questioned things I said. Like I told her that we grew up poor and that I went to a private school. And she's like, how is that possible? I don't really believe you, because if you went to a private school, then, you know, you weren't poor. And it's like, that's a lot of why we were so poor, because my father forced us to be in a cult school where like, yeah, it was a really bad school in terms of it being a cult, in terms of strictness, if you want that, and like your child to perform high, like they'll try and make you do it. But she just decided like you shouldn't in therapy have to justify what you're saying to your therapist. Like that's not their job to question you. Their job is to believe you. Like you probably haven't been believed. That adds to the trauma. Like this whole thing, people say that like trauma is subjective, right? Because it's overwhelming your ability to cope, but different people can cope in different ways. So like that also means that other tools that you have really matter. Like let's say age, for example, like something, say your mom leaving when you're a young child or an infant is going to be traumatic because you need your mom as an infant. If your mom leaves like for a week or whatever, okay? But if you're like 20 and you still live with your mom and she's like, I'm going away for a week, then it's okay. Like, that's not a trauma. So like your ability to cope really does matter. And so if people also like are never trusting you, then you don't have that security. That can also make traumas worse for you as well. Also, if people are blaming you, like saying, oh, you talking about this as a problem, that actually like worsens the trauma. It's not just you talking about it. But a different comment on that video was someone who was like, probably not very nice. They were very upset. They were like, oh, talking about your trauma all the time. I had an ex who did that and he was an alcoholic and he just never improved or got better. And I went to therapy. And so they were like mad at him, but they also like called him a crybaby or something. So I like, on one hand, okay, the person hurt you. They're an alcoholic and you were in a relationship with them. Like, you're going to get hurt being in a relationship with an alcoholic. But like, obviously that person's hurting, and I don't support calling someone a crybaby. Like, people are alcoholics, yes, because of trauma. So, they just weren't right for each other in my mind. And like, yeah, someone can be stuck in like just talking about their trauma over and over again and not actually getting anywhere. And I think there's a variety of reasons as to why that could happen. It could be that the person who's talking about it over and over again, for whatever reason, maybe they're not really capable of making a better decision for themselves. Like, what could be holding them back from making a better decision for themselves to start getting out of this cycle and get out of alcoholism? Like, I don't know, but it could be, having somebody who listens to you well. Maybe the therapists that they had were shitty, like ones that I've had. Maybe they don't actually know. Like, I didn't understand for a really long time why I was depressed. And let me tell you, like, I am in a way, I think, privileged, even though I've had so much trauma at this point in my life. I have the time and the space. Like, I have my own house. I have a steady job. I have support people in my life who enable me to do deep trauma work, to be able to like people will help me with my child, if I need that, because I'm emotionally having a hard time because I'm working through trauma and I might need help with my kid. Like, I have these things. Not everybody always has those things. So, if you've just got too much pressure on you and not all of the support and not a stable home and stuff, like, you've got to be able to take care of yourself. It can make it really hard to work on trauma if like your basic needs are not able to be met. Okay. What else? So, okay, I wonder if it's time for me to talk more about, I'll talk a little bit more about that. I don't think I talked very much about that, study that I read, right? So they just like defined for them what retraumatization meant, which meant an increase in, CPTSD symptoms. And so the therapists who didn't do trauma-informed therapy were more likely to not want to see their clients have more symptomology. And unfortunately, I think that happens a lot in our medical system, where they really don't give people time and space to actually have that like dip, where like, yeah, I'm having worse symptoms now. Like, to think that having more symptoms is a bad thing necessarily is just inaccurate, and it shows that you don't really understand healing from trauma. The therapists who did trauma-informed therapy in this study said that over the course of their treatment, that it was worth having that dip, that they come out better. So that is really important. What ended up being the biggest issue for especially the non-trauma informed therapists was when their clients would talk about trauma and or they would try to do, I guess, like some types of trauma work, but they weren't really very good at it, I guess. They would sometimes have clients who wouldn't come back. Or yeah, like if you force, right? This goes back to like forcing somebody to do it before they're ready, then they're like, I don't want to come back to this therapist anymore. So another therapist I had once really wanted me to be able to be more physically intimate. And that is like, I am a lot better at it, but it didn't happen like just as a result of them. Yeah, like how I became able to be more physically intimate is a whole other crazy story, but it has a lot to do with sexual abuse. And I constantly had flashbacks every single day. I had flashbacks. And she wanted me to be more physically intimate, and I knew it would get into like my boarding school. I don't remember why exactly, but I just know like this alarm was firing in my head when I was in her office one day, and she was really wanting to get to the bottom of something. And I was like, I'm not ready to talk about that. And she was like, oh, this just makes me more curious about it. I really want to be able to get to that thing that you're not able to talk about. Let's talk about this next time you come. Yeah, I stopped seeing her. Like, I was feeling sometimes like I left her office, she would give me really helpful advice. Like, she really did want to help me. But she just had her agenda, and like, you have to respect the client's timeline and the client's ability to do it. And, you know, there were things that I was able to get help from her with, but ultimately I also just got so anxious around going to her office because I didn't know how she would respond to me and what she would try to push me to discuss. And like later, I ended up having a different therapist. And this other therapist, I felt so much safer with. They never pushed me. They were so open. They were a narrative therapist. They still are a narrative therapist. And he was just really open, and that was mainly what he did, was like just create a safe space for his clients to talk. And he didn't really do a lot outside of that. He would just kind of do very little, like asking, you know, how can I help you with this, or like, you know, validating something. And just like noticing, he would sometimes notice things, and he would like to say, well, do you always have this problem? This is one thing he does a lot. He would be like, okay, so you're saying you have this problem and that you have this cycle, but do you always get into that cycle? Does sometimes something stop that cycle? Okay, what is it that happens when you break the cycle? Those times that you break the cycle, how does that happen? Like, I thought that was a great technique. Anyhow, narrative therapist, when I got into the intimacy thing with this therapist, I went to his office. I was like, this is what I need to work on now. Like, I need to get this out. I yelled. I knew I would yell. I had to like preface it. I'm like, once I start talking about this, I'm not going to be able to control myself. I know that my emotions are going to be like high. And yeah, I did. I yelled, I screamed, I stood up, I sat back down, I shook. I was like, I needed to say what I needed to say. And it was so healing. But yeah, like I said, I'm not really going to get into all of it. But what I am going to mention is just like, he didn't force me. He didn't force an agenda on me. When I was ready, I got to share it. And he made the space for me to like fully show how this trauma affected me and to experience it in my body and to yell about my boundaries, how they were and are constantly trampled on by society. Ugh. Anyhow, now it really helped me have boundaries, and it really helped me be able to have better intimacy, but not by being forced to do it. So, all in all, in the study, they said that basically therapists are really like divided on this issue, that but like people who do trauma-informed therapy, like narrative therapy and EMDR and a bunch of other things, they are generally just like more open to and understanding that their clients are going to have more symptoms, and they have to not, they don't push their clients to work on things that they're not ready to work on, and that like over the whole course of the therapy that their clients end up getting better. But then there are other therapists who do believe that, according to this definition, right, of just symptoms, that that talking about your trauma can re-traumatize you. So the definition of re-traumatization is really important. And I think that what's important, though, if you are someone who has experienced trauma, is to really know that, one, experiencing symptoms of the trauma is not hurting yourself. You did not traumatize yourself. And by talking about it, you're not re-traumatizing yourself. You're not doing anything wrong. You're not doing anything bad. You're probably talking about it because you want solutions, because you want a way out, because this is hurting, because you're hurting. So I think that, to me, like the definition I understood of re-traumatization is in line with the one I gave at the beginning, where it's actually a new traumatic event, similar to another traumatic event you've already had, right? So it's more like what causes CPTSD, right, is constant re-traumatization. Now I'm going to tell you more about my experience of like talking about my trauma. Okay. And how other people have reacted. So first I'll talk a bit about the boarding school, the troubled teen industry, school I was in, and I don't know, it's why you call it school. It ain't school. It's human trafficking. That's what it really is. But that experience, and then I'm also going to talk about like who, generally doesn't want to hear me talk about my trauma, and like different things about like actually talking to people in your current life, So, okay, my experience in the troubled teen industry, right? I was abused by my dad, neglected by my mother. I mean, neglected by both my parents, but physically abused. I do have the understanding, even though my father didn't like the R word me, I now have the belief that he also sexually abused me, but I didn't have the same like definition of sexual abuse always as I do now, or understanding of it. But then I was like actually molested for many years, from 12 to 14 years old by adult men, basically because I was trying to get away from my dad, and they knew that that I was hiding from my dad. They knew I was hiding from my dad and that they could use that to their advantage. So I got sent to boarding school. When I got sent there, once I was fighting so bad, getting sent there. My parents actually took me there, and that was probably, I don't think, as traumatic as I'm really sure, I really believe it's not as traumatic as gooning, which is when basically your parents pay for you to be kidnapped and you have no fucking clue what's happening. They just wake you up in the middle of the night and drag you into their van, and sometimes people get handcuffs put on them, and your family just lets them take you away in the middle of the night while you're sleeping, and you don't know where you're going until you get to the troubled teen industry. Totally human trafficking. So, I mean, they charge a lot of money to transport poor children. Yeah, my parents took me. It was definitely a traumatic experience, as well. But that's for another story. But after going through all of that trauma that I was going through up to them dropping me off, I just was so defeated. I was so deflated. I gave up. I had no more fight left in me. I was just I'm dead. I'm compliant. And they just killed me a little bit more and more and more the longer I was there. But one thing they do, it took me a really long time to get to level H. Level H, I think, is when you started doing these workbooks. They had anger workbook and forgiveness workbook and boundaries workbook, and you had to work on those, and you had to fill them out, and then you had to go talk to a staff that would review them and talk to you about them. And it was like your counselor, but these people are not trained in any fucking thing except to gaslight the kids and be abusive and think that it is for Jesus and for saving people. I mean, the staff are definitely cult members. 100%. They're the real cult members, dude. So one time, I think I was working on the anger workbook for a while, and one time I thought, okay, I'll say what I think makes me angry, because I asked, what makes you angry? And I wrote, when my dad beats my mom. I think that's what makes me angry. But I was so out of touch with my emotions and anger. I didn't really understand what anger was and what this whole fucking workbook was about. But I was I think that makes me mad. Really, it probably made me more scared and hopeless. I mean, that's what I was in touch with, was fear and bad, negative, no one's gonna come and help, and there's no way out of this. He rules, and the cops defend him, the cult school I was in defend him, then the troubled teen industry defended him. Everybody was out for him. So I learned not to talk to people about my dad being abusive, because that was not going well for me before I got in the troubled teen industry. But then they have you do this anger workbook. So I wrote that, and then when they wanted to talk to me about it, they said to me, Kelly, you can't say these things. You're lying, and you're not going to be able to move through the program if you keep saying things like this. They didn't say that I'm lying, but they said I was lying. And basically that I was being manipulative, and that I wouldn't be able to move through the program, which basically means you'll never get to go home. You'll never get more privileges. You want to know what kind of privileges we were hoping to get? Oh, things like stickers, being allowed to have a picture of your family, being allowed to draw. But you couldn't share any drawings with people. You couldn't show them ever what you did unless it was staff. They would look through your stuff. Oh, what are other privileges that we got? I don't even remember, but they were not real privileges. They were, having a picture of your family is not a privilege. They took that away. That was just something that they decided to take away. people. So I was told not to talk about it. I was told that I was lying. Then I started filling out the angry workbook with what they wanted me to say, until it totally brainwashed me, repeating just what they wanted me to say about myself, which was just like things along the lines of like, I'm just mad because I want to get to go do drugs or something. Like, it wasn't real. It was not real, because what I originally said was me trying to be real. And they told me I wasn't allowed to do that. So, yeah, that was like the beginning of like the real brainwashing, was telling me not to talk about it. And that's why this channel is called Kelly Talking, because they didn't allow me to talk. I wasn't allowed to talk about my trauma. I was only supposed to do these workbooks, but I wasn't allowed to talk about shit. None of us were. We weren't allowed to talk about suffering and pain and the bad things that happened to us, anything that our parents or family did to hurt us. We weren't allowed to talk about friends. We weren't allowed to talk about things that we liked, like movies and music. We weren't even allowed to say the food that we wanted to eat at one point. They took that away. Like, bad. So that's why I talk now, because that's part of healing. That's why this channel is called what it's called. They did no talk. That was the main thing. There was a lot of, you're on no talk right now, which didn't just mean verbalization. It meant no looking at people. It meant no writing things down. It meant no touching people, anything that could be considered a form of communication. So, that was really bad. And you know what that did to me? It enabled me to be abused further. I ended up going and living with my dad after I left that place, when I could have gone to live with my mom. But they convinced me that I was lying and that my mother was lying about my dad being abusive. So it just enabled me to go get abused more by not being allowed to talk about it, by being told that. And another thing, like while I was there, I remember thinking I had this like bright, brilliant idea, which was that thinking about your trauma, but I didn't know the word trauma, just thinking about things that hurt. When you think about it, you experience the hurt over again. And I remember thinking that I had this like aha moment of, I'm hurting myself by thinking about this. That like that event only happened once, but every time I think about it, I'm hurting myself. So I started victim blaming myself, telling myself I was hurting myself. But that's not how it works. The hurt happened. And like something has to be done about it. It's like, imagine if you like had an accident while you're doing some work on your house and you cut off your fingers, like you're cutting some wood, but you cut off a finger. And then instead of them fixing that, they're just like, you can't talk about that. Don't talk about it. You're just thinking about it. You need to not think about it, right? Thinking about it is what's traumatizing you. No, I need to talk about it to let you know I need help to stop bleeding. Maybe they can put my finger back on, or maybe I need some other surgery. I'm not a doctor. I don't know. But like, you actually need to have a solution, and talking is part of the solution. But like, just because trauma can a lot of the time live in your body and not be something that is like bleeding physically, blood going everywhere, that doesn't make it any less like a trauma that needs talking about to be able to heal, that needs a solution to be found, right? Like a lot of talking about it is to figure out, well, what's the solution? Also, thinking about talking about it, like one way that I have found really healing in my trauma or like helpful when I'm having a really hard time coping with it, is writing music about it. So you can write poetry, you can journal, like all of these things can be so helpful in getting, working through trauma. And there's a lot of great music by so many musicians about trauma, and people relate to that. It's healing, right? So, yeah, like victim blaming. By telling people that talking about your trauma is re-traumatizing is victim blaming, I learned to do that to myself. And yeah, then you're ultimately really not learning from that experience. Like, you're not learning that. For me, like my dad, I knew my dad was abusive, but by following what they wanted, I ended up believing that I was the problem for talking about it, for believing it, that like I had to stop saying that. And then my dad would be the good guy, right? Problem solved. Yeah, I got into great relationships after this boarding school too. Yeah, I'm in a good one now. Okay, so now, people who get mad when you talk about your trauma. In my experience, the people who are the most upset when you talk about your trauma are the people who hurt you, or who just have some part to do with it. They may not be the person who directly did it, but they did something along it. So like my grandma on my dad's side, she paid for the boarding school. I tried talking to her, like asking her for documents about the boarding school. I wanted to, because she also sends us Save a lot of stuff. So I know she has records from that school. And so I don't generally talk to her, but I reached out to her to ask her for that. And she just twisted my head so bad. Like her snooty, high horse attitude of like, Kelly, haven't you ever thought that not the whole world is out to get you? I'm like, I'm not saying the whole world's out to get you. I'm just asking for documents about this boarding school. Well, haven't you ever thought that, what were you doing? What were you doing at the time? And it's like, what was I doing? What were you doing? Don't you know, like, what you were? She's just, ugh. So, like, they don't want to hear it because they're guilty. Like, I also would try to talk to her about just different stuff, but, like, they don't want their guilt. It's called DARVO. Deny, attack, and reverse victim order. So the perpetrator denies what they did. They attack the person who they hurt, and they reverse the victim order. Like, I'm the victim, not you. DARVO. And that's a lot, I think, of like telling people that you're re-traumatizing yourself. It's kind of a DARVO move. Something that happened more recently, I learned people were talking behind my back, and the person who basically they accidentally sent me a text that they intended for other people, kind of apologized, but also in like the worst way. Like, oh, I apologize, but that's really not me. I'm not that kind of person. And, you are the person who like, I'm just concerned about like how you might be hurting other people or hurting yourself. But it's like, you totally just LOL'd about the fact that I have CPTSD and like shared mean stuff. And she's the one who actually like shares these like TikTok or whatever videos where people are pretending that there's some kind of wisdom and like just not talking about your trauma, how you're the one, like by having boundaries and by talking about your trauma, both of those things, like you're actually hurting other people. I mean, the videos definitely are more convincing in a way, like, I'm kind of mocking them because that's the underneath, like what the message is, but the way that they say it, it's like, roses. So then I tried talking to somebody else also about this, and they were like the person who I know the text was intended for, and they're just like saying how basically I need to forgive this person. And it's like, and like how the fact that I'm thinking about it just shows that I'm not like ready to move on, and I don't want to have like a resolution. And I'm like, literally talking about it with you is how I'd have a resolution. Like, I need to feel comfortable with you, and not like you're going to be making fun of the fact that I have CPTSD and that I set up boundaries, right? What kind of boundaries do I have? I have boundaries like I don't like to attend religious events, and I get upset when people repeatedly invite me to them. Yeah, because they already know I'm not going to go. So stop inviting me, and stop trying to convince me that it'll be okay. Maybe you'll learn about our religion and it's actually not that bad. Maybe you don't know. I'm like, I know about your religion more than you know about your religion, because I'm not drinking the Kool-Aid. Any hooty doody. I'm almost done. Okay. So yeah. So people who are like straight up doing Darvo, right? By saying that like you're re-traumatizing yourself, and the fact that you're like talking about these issues, that you know, you're just the one who doesn't want to move on. Like, literally talking about the issues usually means you want to move on. Actually, it means you want a solution, because just doing the same thing that you've always been doing isn't working, right? So maybe talking about it, you can come up with a solution. Anyhow, what about real friends who can also get worn out talking about trauma? Like, I do have friends who sometimes have been there for me when I need to talk about stuff. I'm having a really hard time, and I don't always want to call my therapist. Like, I have friends too, right? And some friends like with great insight and stuff. And I do believe that like the best friendships have both like being able to share the depth inside of you, your pain and beauty, like everything, and the lightness also in the world, like just simple little things that aren't that deep. Like, there is a balance, especially if someone is pretty healthy and hasn't experienced a lot of trauma, or maybe they've healed a lot of their trauma. They may not want to talk about the trauma as much because they've gotten a lot better at living in the moment, because they've worked through their trauma so they can live in the moment. Like, honor that and try to get into that too. Get into living in the moment, but it's a balance. You can try to live in the moment, and then you also have to deal with your trauma. It's like a cycle of, you know, of life. I guess you cycle through working on trauma and enjoying the moment, because you need to enjoy the moment for life to be good, right? Like, but when you haven't worked on your trauma, you can only enjoy the moment so much. So you get to enjoy your real life and make better decisions and see things more clearly the more that you work on your trauma. But there's also clarity in just seeing the beauty in life, in being here in the present time. But right, to get a deeper appreciation and a deeper like ability to make good decisions, you have to also work through your trauma, or to like feel better about yourself. Sometimes you have to address that trauma. So I think it's good to, you know, definitely work through your trauma in a narrative way, in a lot of different ways, but also in, you know, like keeping, you don't maybe necessarily have to focus always on gratitude, but to have it sometimes, like to realize that like it's a balance, and no, like toxic positivity level gratitude where it's like, that's all we do. We only do the positive emotions. No, like all the emotions are valid, are necessary, are human. None of them are bad. They might feel bad. You can say like, oh, these are the good ones, like joy, happiness, excitement. And then like the bad ones are like anger, sadness. But it's not bad in the sense that you shouldn't do it, or there's something wrong with you for feeling those things. It's just bad because it feels bad. The good ones are good because they feel good. but life is full of all of these, and their information. All right, so I'd love to hear from you. If you listen to this whole video, I'd love to hear what you think, and what your experience has been. So I hope you have a good weekend. And if you see my other videos, you know I got a haircut. The front ones, well, I pinned this one up, but I let my kids cut my hair. They decided to keep the front extra long. And I let my kids decide the style and cut my hair. And so yeah, so my hair is a little different. And my therapist is amazed. She's like, oh my gosh, most people wouldn't do that. And I'm like, yeah, I mean, everybody's different. I am, hair grows. I'm not like that attached to it. I've had a buzzed head too. Like, I've totally shaved off, buzzed my head. So like, that's always a possibility if I don't like my haircut. But yeah, I think it's cute. I think my kids did a great job. But it is like, I never would have thought to like be like, oh, I'm gonna leave some in the front longer. That's not something I ever would have thought of. Yeah, that was fun. All right, have a great weekend. I hope that you get rest. I hope that you get acceptance. I hope that you just are able to enjoy moments this weekend, relax, and just exist in the world. And if you like are here anywhere, I want you to know I'm proud of you. I'm proud of you for taking the time to explore ideas and be open. And I'd love to be able to hear from you as well. All right. Bye.